All right. One more person can fit. Right, welcome everyone. This is the anti-ransomware session number 3 for today. My name is Anders Olsson, and I would like to start by asking you a question. Do you think that VCF 9 is more secure against ransomware than vSphere 8? And I mean ransomware against the underlying hypervisor platform. How many of you think that VCF 9 is more secure? 1.5. How about vSphere 8? And the rest of you don't know. It's fine. It's a trick question. But what I'm trying to argue here is that VMware is talking a lot about the other stuff in VCF, AI, Kubernetes, the cool stuff, and not enough, in my opinion, about the underlying vSphere platform that kind of underpins everything. So that's why it's a trick question. But with that said, I would like everyone to read Bob Planker's blog post about what's new in VCF 9 security. It has a lot of good stuff, but I think they're still missing some parts, and some parts are a bit too easy to circumvent for the attackers, and that's what I'm going to explain today. So, as I said, I love talking about the VMware security, so does VMware, but I speak more about the underlying platform, the bits and pieces of vSphere. They talk about the products that secure the VMs and makes it more difficult for the attackers to get to vSphere. That's good. But we have to keep that in mind, that the messaging is a bit different here. Yeah, again, I think I've made my point, right? vSphere is still there, it's not going away. And this is where they do the ransomware attacks. Sure, they do it against the VMs as well, but they do it against vSphere as well, and that's what we need to protect against. So who am I with all these opinions? My name is Anders Olsson. I work for a security company called TrueSec in Sweden. I have worked with Microsoft. I was young and needed the money. I've spent most of my career working with VMware, though. Done a lot of architect operation stuff for customers, took my VCDX. But the last 5 years, I've been working exclusively with vSphere and security. And I do that in 3 different flavors. So I do the proactive stuff, like now. I help customers do their architecture operations to avoid them getting ransomware or other types of attacks against them. I also do work with our managed detection and response, our SOC, to help them build detections to be able to spot these attacks before they become a problem. And I also, unfortunately, work in our incident response team, where we help customers that call us and say, hi, we've gotten ransomware, or we suspect we have an attacker in our environment, can you help us? So it's in the last bit there where I have learned a lot about how vSphere works, how about these attacks work, how you spot them in the logs and so on, because I do the forensics and the kind of recovery. So I take that back into the proactive work and try to give my customers the relevant knowledge about how to prevent this. Because you probably get 1,000 pieces of advice every week on what you should do, which is most important. And I try to boil that down to what really works, right? Then you might have compliance requirements on you as well. That you should do as well. But I'll tell you the bottom line bits and pieces. So next question. Is ESXi Linux or is it not? I know this is a sensitive topic. And I think the answer is it doesn't matter. What we need to know is that ESXi is different in a good way and in a bad way. So the bad thing is that ESXi can't run any EDR or anti-malware agent. It's like it's only made for running VMs. And I see you, Austin. There is an asterisk here. I'll get back to that in a bit, because that is actually changing. But we have traditionally been forced to do monitoring by sending syslog from ESXi and vCenter to a syslog receiver. How many of you have tried this, sending syslog out? Okay, what would you say about the amount of logs going out? Too little? Just enough? Too much? Yeah, it's way too much. It's like debug logs. It's what VMware support needs to troubleshoot your performance issues or whatever. So that still needs to be fixed, I think. And there's also very little documentation on what you should look for in these logs. What should you alert on? What does it look like? What does it look like when the attacker does this or that? So this is difficult, right? So the good thing about ESXi is that it's difficult for the attackers to get persistence in ESXi. When you reboot an ESXi host, it rebuilds the file system from scratch, and then it applies the configuration. Also, if you enable UEFI secure boot, as Christian talked about this morning in the session, there are no known ways for them to get persistence and kind of execute code at boot up. So that's a good thing about ESXi. Another good thing is that ESXi is perfect for allow listing binaries. The only code that needs to run in an ESXi host is VMware's own code and partner-signed code, right? You don't need to run anything else. Or does anyone here need to run any unsigned code in ESXi? Huh? Yeah. So for most customers, they don't need it, so, which means we can allow list binaries, which means everything else is disallowed to run. So we have an ESXi host, we have a ransomware that wants to be run here. If we enable this setting called exec install only, it will not be able to run. And it looks like something like this. This is a session that my colleague recorded. This is a live sample Akira. Don't try this at home. He's a reverse engineer. He knows what he's doing. So he tried to run this Akira binary here, and ESXi says operation not permitted. Great, right? That was exec install only, blocking it. Well, unfortunately, all the attacker needs to do to get around this is disable the setting, set it to 0. Now they can execute their ransomware. So great, the protection is there. It's on by default. Which ESXi version is this, by the way? This is 8, because 8 is the only version where they have this user world exec install only, the runtime setting that can be immediately disabled. Only existed in version 8, does not exist in version 9 anymore. So they have a slightly better protection in 9, and I'll get to that. So I'm supposed to have an agenda. I'm supposed to talk about why this is important. I'm supposed to talk about how these attacks happen, and of course, how we protect ourselves against these attacks. There might be time for Q&A at the end. Otherwise, I'll be around here. So please come talk to me. I am not dangerous at all. So the attacks. These attacks have been happening for quite some time now. I started working with this in 2021, and that's when these attacks kind of took speed. All the good ransomware attack gangs, they started porting their Linux binaries to ESXi and doing attacks in the big way. So since then, very little has changed when it comes to the last part, when they get to ESXi or vSphere. What has changed is that they've kind of expanded the attacks. They do more attacks on industrial systems now, which usually or often also use VMware or ESXi or vSphere. They have also gotten a lot better at getting to ESXi and getting into your environments. For example, Scattered Spider do these very sophisticated social engineering attacks, where they get admin accounts by pretending to be someone else. And when they have an admin account, it's easier to get in, right? And also, it's not all about ransomware. There are more sophisticated attacks out there. And if you have good enough information for a nation-state actor, they might burn a 0-day just to get into your environment or just to stay hidden in your environment. But everybody needs to protect against ransomware. Some of you also need this extra protection. But you need to start with the basic stuff, be able to protect against ransomware, right? Also, we see these reports. This was a great write-up from Signia about threat actors hiding inside ESXi hosts and then launching SSH tunnels from the ESXi hosts. And why did they choose to hide in ESXi? Well, it's the least protected, least monitored place in most customer networks nowadays. The Windows servers, the Linux servers and clients, they have EDR or anti-malware. They have much better protection and monitoring, but ESXi is kind of naked. That's why they chose to hide there. So let's change that. So how do these attacks happen? Well, the end goal of all attacks is to get into the ESXi hosts. And they need to get in using SSH, and they need to get their code in there to execute the code, which might be ransomware for encryption, or it might be something else for persistence, for staying there. And they usually get in through vCenter server, because if I, as an attacker, own vCenter server, then I also own your ESXi hosts. Is there anyone who doesn't agree with that? So, and it's not, I mean, it's not that easy. They do have to do some tricks. So here is my vCenter server in ESXi host. This ESXi host does not have SSH running. It can even have lockdown mode enabled. But what they have forgotten here is that there is this user. Like, pretend this is an Active Directory user or Active Directory group, because that's how it happens in 90% of the successful attacks. Someone in AD has the administrator role. And that means that they can get in. I mean, they can log in through this web UI if they have the administrator role, but they also need to get into the ESXi host, right? They need to SSH in. So they don't know the root password. So how do I change the root password on an ESXi host? It's not in the menu here, right? So you can do it through the API or PowerCLI. Oops. So what I've done here, I prepped this user called Anders. That's the one that had the administrator role. I'm connected to the vCenter server. So now I can, here we go, target this ESXi host called ESX03. I open an ESXCLI shell on it over PowerCLI. Make sure I'm in the right one. Yes, I am. And then I can just execute this. So ESXCLI system account set. And I target this root user, and now the password is that. Note that I didn't know the password before, but now I do. Now it has my password. I could also have created another user. I don't need to use root. So that's how you do that. Oops, I'm going back to the PowerPoint. So there are also other attacks where they don't go through vCenter server, or they go directly to the vCenter server without having an account, but then they need to have an unpatched vulnerability, for example. Or they can go directly to ESXi host, then they need an unpatched vulnerability, or someone has weak credentials or leaked credentials. Someone might have a passwords.txt on their desktop as an administrator. Of course, not you. Other ones have that, and you're laughing, but I know that probably a few of you are saving the passwords in your browser. Unfortunately, that's as bad. So if I'm an attacker, I get to your computer, I can fish out the credentials from that, unless you have some extra protection on top of it. Like when you access your password, you have to type in a master password so that they are encrypted in a good way in the browser. But this is not a very common attack flow. So the most common one is the one through Active Directory. That's the one that I showed you. So the number one advice I give to my customers is don't use Active Directory to authenticate vCenter admins. You can use it to authenticate low-priv users, but not the ones that have the administrator role, not the ones that can get into your ESXi hosts and perform a ransomware attack. But Active Directory is still kind of in the guidance for vSphere and VCF, but also look at the other ones here. These are other identity providers that you can use, and these support multi-factor authentication, which you should force on your admins at least. So if you use Active Directory to authenticate vSphere admins, and your Active Directory gets popped, it's not VMware's fault that your environment gets owned, right? It's because you've trusted an identity provider. If you trust it, you need to trust it. So you need to have a threat modeling that says, attacker takes our AD, because that's kind of probable in an attack. So if that happens, they shouldn't also take your vSphere environment, because that's a lot more work for you to recover from. Other attack vectors, yeah, you can join your ESXi host to the Active Directory. Please don't do that. You also have a new threat vector here, which is called SDC Manager. Now, why is this a threat? This is what I alluded to when I said is VCF more secure or not. Because, maybe it's called VCF Ops now. In here, you can go change the passwords, right? You can rotate passwords, which means somewhere in that appliance, the SDC Manager, there is a list of passwords for its service accounts. And I wish I had a demo to prove it, but I haven't gotten around to it, or I'm not sure I have the knowledge to do it. But I will show it that vCenter Server has the exact same thing. Because in vCenter Server, it has a service account on each ESXi host, right? What's the name of that account? VPX user, okay. So let's say I'm an attacker, and I find your vCenter backup, and it's not encrypted. What can I do with it? So I can install my own VCSA, right? I can import this backup, and now I have a copy of your vCenter server. And what can I do in that? Well, I can start it up, and I can run some nice commands for it. Whoops. Here we go. This is demo number 2. So I can run this. So how do I have the password for this one? Well, I installed it, right? I installed the appliance, so I know the password. So now I've done a Postgres query here against the vCenter database. I've asked it to give me the VPX user and its password. Well, unfortunately, this password is encrypted. But just like with your browsers, unless it's protected with some other password or something, I mean, when you boot up vCenter server, do you have to go and type in a password? No. So the encryption key is actually right here. It's in a file. Oops, I have to type quit here. Oh, I might have fat-fingered that. There we go. So this is the encryption key. So now I have the encryption key, and I have the encrypted password. So what I can do now is I can go to my Linux box here. I can use this script. This is a Python script called quick decrypt. And I can just type in the values that I just stole from vCenter server, the encrypted password and the encryption key. Whoops, I have to go to TMP. There we go. So this is the password for VPX user in that ESXi host in my vCenter server. So now I can exit out here. Now I can, as an attacker here, upload my, oh yeah, I didn't finish the first demo properly. I have to start SSH as well. I can upload my ransomware, I can go in, and I can execute it. There we go. And I also enabled that. I could do this from the command line as well, but it's easier to show you here. So, second attempt. So here's the password, paste. There. So I uploaded this test.sh, that's my ransomware. And now I can go in and, oops. Badly prepped demo, I apologize. Here we go. So I'm going to the same server, same user, but I'm doing SSH instead of, there we go. Hope I can paste this directly. Yes, I can. cdtmp. Here is my script, test.sh. And so I can just run this test.sh. It says permission denied. Why? So I have to chmod it first. Operation not permitted. Why does it say that? Sorry? Exec installed only. Well, good thing I know how to turn it off, because I showed you that in the first demo, right? I have to, oops, not paste. Long story short, I have a German keyboard on my laptop. That's my excuse. So I turned it off in the way that I did in the demo. It says unable to find option. And why is that? Exactly. So this user world exec install only exists in ESXi 8. Now I'm on 9. On 9 there is another one that has existed previously, but now it's on by default. So this is the kernel variant of the same setting. So, and the good thing about this one is, whoops, when I try to execute it on my German keyboard, copy. Copy, paste, live demos are fun, right? So now I should be able to run this malware, right? No, it says operation not permitted. Why is that? Well, in the kernel version of the setting, you have to reboot the host before it takes effect. So I have to reboot the hosts. Would you notice me as an attacker if I rebooted your hosts? Would you be able to react and stop my attack within, what does it take, 5 minutes? Depends on what time of day and if someone happens to be looking at the screen, right? So yeah, so you would have to reboot the host and then wait, but still, it can be turned off, which is kind of a shame. All right, so that was that vector. Another nice attack vector is your backup applications, because they usually have very high privileges into your vSphere environment, right? If you give them the administrator role, they can do the exact same thing as I did in the first demo, so please don't do that. Check your backup vendor's documentation on how to lock down and do least privilege on this role. Also, please do not put your backup servers in Active Directory, because that's even worse. The attacker will take your Active Directory. They shouldn't also own your backups then. And keep at least one immutable copy of your backup data. I, as an incident responder, I know this, because if you at least have your backup data left, then we can help you get back on your feet. We have had far too many customers that have had their primary data encrypted and their backups deleted. How are we supposed to help them? It's not a good situation to be in, right? Next attack vector is these VM escape vulnerabilities, and there are plenty of them. Every year there is a hacking competition. There are a couple of these, and every time ESXi is in the firing line, they will find something, a vulnerability. And the last 2 years, it has been VM escape. So that means that an attacker can get from inside the guest OS to your hypervisor. So from there, they can attack other VMs, right? So this might be super isolated VM. It controls some very important robot somewhere that does something that costs $1 million per minute when it's not functional. So you might have done really good network isolation between these two, but if they run on the same hypervisor or cluster, an attacker can jump this way. So, and how do you avoid this? Well, this is patching. When these vulnerabilities are announced, you need to patch so that they cannot be used. And this is extra exciting in hosted environments. So if you are in a shared environment in your hosting provider, this VM might not even be yours. This might be some other customers of theirs that gets attacked and someone gets into your environment. So think about whether you should live in a shared environment or not if you're using a hosting provider. So how do we protect against this? Well, first of all, you can. And how do I know that? Well, because we see the ones that do get attacked and what they do wrong. And we can tell you how to avoid that. Mainly, we see that the ones that have done their proactive work, they don't get hit as much. Notice there is some overlap that is not zero, right? But you can significantly lower your risk of getting attacked if you do good architecture, operations, all of that. We also see that the organizations that have good detection and response also do not get hit. So you will be hearing from vendors who say, oh, our product is going to solve everything because it does detection and response. And you will hear from people saying, oh, our product is going to fix because this does this architecture or hardening thing. But my advice for you is to do both. Because if you do both, you can use the hardening in architecture to make it more difficult for the attacker so that they need to bump into your tripwires, which you will detect using the logging and response, which buys you time. So that's why both of these in combination is extra good. So you want to be here, of course, where the risk of getting hit is not zero, but very small. All right. So the recommendations, just to summarize, I've touched upon this. Don't use Active Directory to authenticate vSphere admins. Make it difficult to get to the vSphere management interfaces. So an administrator shouldn't be able to sit on the regular laptop and just administer the VMware environment. Not with the same identity, not with the same, over the same network. So make them jump through something, a PAM system, jump host, VPN, whatever. Make them have to do multi-factor authentication somewhere along the way. Then you'll significantly lower the risk of an attacker just taking the easy path. Config hardening, I touched upon that. Enable UEFI secure boot for the ESXi host. That's for the underlying hosts, the physical one. Enable exec install only and monitor it, depending on which version you're on. And disable VPX user shell access. I'm going to show you that right now. So both of the demos that I did, they relied on the VPX user. I can't find it myself. The VPX user being able to do all these funky things. So what the good thing is that since vSphere 8, you can actually lock that down. So if you list the accounts in an ESXi host, you'll see that they all have this thing called shell access. And what you can do, if you're in, you can disable shell access for, why doesn't copy work? There we go. You can disable shell access for VPX user. And as you can see, it worked immediately. I got kicked out as VPX user. And that's good. So we prevented that attack. The good thing is that this will also prevent the first attack that I did, where I used vCenter's VPX user to change the root password. So now it says only users with shell access can make these changes. That's great, right? So, but what did we say about the protection? Some of them can be circumvented or turned off. So there was a very nifty security researcher who realized that you can circumvent this. So even though VPX user can't change the other passwords or go in through the shell, it is allowed to do it if you just use host profiles. This is a good finding, right? Whoever found this should get a CVE, right? Yeah, I didn't. So what they did, instead they changed the documentation, and at the bottom they put, oh, this can be circumvented by using, for example, host profiles. So now I've set yet another password on the root account using host profiles. So again, good protection can unfortunately be circumvented. And of course, detection and response. Enable logging, make sure someone looks at the logs, make sure someone has good alerting for your logs, and that they and you know what to do if they call you in the middle of the night and say, hey, we think someone is in your VMware environment. How do you cut them out? Do you have an emergency firewall rule that you can flip? Will you shut down your ESXi host? Probably not. Because remember, all you need to do is shut down the management access. Don't have to shut down your virtual machines or their network access. So do that before the incident hits. That's my advice. Yeah, exec install only. I think VMware should make it permanent. And this is just my silly idea. Don't take this seriously. So why do they have it disableable, if that's a word? Well, it's because some customers do need to run third-party code that's not signed, right? So what they could do, they could have the regular secure ESXi download with exec install only permanent, and then they can have like an insecure version where it can be disabled, right? Everyone's happy. Yes, this is my contribution to the security debate here. Also, remember the asterisk. I said that ESXi cannot run security products. Well, it can. So if you look at the compatibility guide, there's a section called daemon management. Do you usually look in that section? I had never looked at it. So if you look in here, you see all these tools that can be run inside ESXi, and it's mostly like, NIC configuration utilities from Broadcom. Broadcom, the company that makes network cards. But if you go to the last page, there's a company called Valley Cyber and a product called ZeroLock, which is certified to run inside ESXi. It's a signed VIB, everything, it's going to work by the book, it's supported, and it adds a lot of good security features, such as you can force SSH MFA. So if someone tries to SSH into your ESXi host, they have to put in a two-factor code. So that would effectively stop 99% of all the attacks today. Because that's the attackers have to go in through SSH, right? So I'm not affiliated with them, I'm just mentioning, because it's the only security product that is on this list. Also, beware of poor log alerts. If your CM vendor says, oh, we'll catch the attacks, as soon as someone types this in the console, we'll catch them. Yeah, great. This is 3 seconds before the encryption starts. Also, you can circumvent it by doing this. This is still going to work. Oh, if they tell you, oh, we'll get it through some fuzzing rule. Well, this also works. So you can base 64 encode the commands and decode them on the fly. So will they still catch that? So the important thing is that your security monitoring capability looks at the system outputs, not the shell inputs, because the shell inputs can be fuzzed like this. Right? So in summary, lots of great protection features that can be disabled. Combine the proactive stuff with the reactive stuff, you'll have really good security. And 46 seconds for Q&A before that. Thank you very much for coming to the session. All right. Who has the first question? Yes?
So do you see value in exec installed only if an attacker can use something like Python to get around it, like a third-party script language?
Yeah, so this is, if I had another 15 minutes, I would talk about that. So exec installed only prevents binaries from running, the non-signed binaries. And Python is signed in ESXi because it's used internally in ESXi, right? And Christian, you showed the shell script that runs and does the encryption. But if exec install only was permanent, it would at least delay the attackers. They wouldn't be able to use the stuff they use today, the compiled binaries. They would have to put in the key or a password as well, which we can find in our logging tools. So it's not 100% protection, even if it was permanent, but it's going to make it more difficult. Yes, more questions? All right. Thank you very much. I think we're going to room number 1 now, the prize thingy. All right.